June Joust has finally come upon us, and we got to see some surprising matchups. We saw the Atlanta Reign shred through the Shock. Nobody expected that one, I don't believe. And we have some interesting matchups. Not really so much Dallas and Shanghai, as we've seen that match before, but the Atlanta Reign versus the New York Excelsior is something that we haven't seen in a very long time because of the team's divisions in the APAC region and North America. And this is the first time that both teams have really gotten this far, except for Nixel in Season 1. So it's interesting to see both teams finally get to a semifinal type position here. First match we're talking about is Atlanta versus New York. Both of them, like I said, have shocking wins. Atlanta beating the Shock and Boston, which really wasn't all that much of an upset. And then we have New York, who are the only people to have beaten Spark this tournament, which everyone expected that, the Spark, who were looking absurdly strong the past couple weeks, were going to easily make it to the tournament and be a close contender for the match, but it wasn't. Both these teams, New York and Atlanta, are the underdogs easily, which mostly come from their inconsistency. Both teams having really strong performances like we saw this past week, where Nixel versus Spark and Atlanta versus Shock, but we've also seen them at lows that really put into question their strength. Atlanta, though, they have the strong DPS duo in Pelican and Kai. Most specifically, Kai, who is really proving his ability here. He's really proving how strong he is on the hit scan with those cold killer eyes as he headshots everybody on the team. Could that be how we see it, where Kai just shreds through New York? It's a potential, but you also have to put into the fact of Hawk and Gator, who last season really didn't have much of a hero pool. Gator was basically always playing Reinhardt, and Hawk was always playing whatever. But now we're seeing them actually be able to really pull together and do double shield really well as dive. Both teams, Gator has really improved on the Winston and the Orisa, and it's really nice to see that, because Atlanta now has actually more compositions they can play other than Ryan Rush, which has always been what they could play. But not to cut any slack on New York, we've seen a really impressive performance by them, especially Jonak, who we haven't really seen perform very well since Season 1, and now he's actually returning as a pretty dominant force this year. And you also have Bianca and Ivy, as well as Jonak, who are being great leaders in each of their roles to these rookies, like Feather, Friday, and Yakpung, to really assist them in becoming a lot better. And it's really nice to see that as well, because we see Feather, who's pretty good on Echo, as well as Friday, who's showing he's a really strong Lucio as well. So the team has some really strong parts, but where they fall apart is really their synergy together. It's not as strong as, say, Atlanta, which is why I am going to give it a win to Atlanta, but I'm going to give it a map 5 victory. It's going to be close. It's going to be a good match from two inconsistent teams, which is what makes this match so interesting. We could easily see New York 3-0 Atlanta, or Atlanta 3-0 New York, or we could see a map 5. It could go either way for the team. Next up, Shanghai versus Dallas Fuel. Dallas has a bit of an issue for this tournament. They have Pine, who is playing in the Widowmaker tournament, which means he's more than likely able to play against Shanghai in the rest of the tournament. Could that possibly cost Dallas the win? Potentially, because this past week has been the only time Pine has been able to really play with the Dallas Fuel and kind of like practice. But we could possibly see Pine versus Lip, and we could maybe just see Doha and Sparkle being the DPS duo, which I feel is going to be likely. As much as it would be incredibly exciting to see Pine play, Doha and Sparkle really have proven that they don't need to play hit scan to be able to shut down a hit scan. And that's not putting down the other teams, because there's some really strong hit scans. In fact, they're fighting one in Shanghai with Lip, who's been able to actually play the hit scan. Last season, he was mostly playing Sombra, but now we're actually being able to see him play the hit scan, especially now that they've lost DM, who has retired alongside Erster, who retired last month, which I actually never knew. And then they also have Huru, who's new. Not really necessarily to the league. He was playing on New York last year, and now he's here on Shanghai. We really haven't, I don't believe we've seen him play. It's mostly just been Lip and Fleta, their usual duo. But we could possibly see Huru finally come out. I don't think so. I think they're just going to run their bread and butter compositions, which kind of lets them to be a little inconsistent, especially against North American teams like the Dallas Fuel, as we saw last tournament, where they really couldn't do much against them. They weren't that bad against Dallas, but they weren't as good against Dallas. So I will give it to the Dallas Fuel, and I'm going to give it a 3-1, because during the last tournament, Shanghai did take a couple maps off of Dallas, but they definitely looked weak in the matches that they did lose. Which leads us up to New York versus Shanghai, a match we haven't seen this tournament. They both look strong going in. That is evident by their dominant victories in the knockouts. But could this really be an easy win for Shanghai, like a lot of people would probably believe? I don't really believe so. Nixel does look really strong. They have great pieces, like I have mentioned. But Shanghai also does too. So it could be close, but I am going to give it a 3-0 to the Shanghai Dragons over New York. Both teams, they do look good, but Nixel is just, they're easily the weakest link in the tournament, I believe. Which is why I believe that they're going to be knocked out in round 1. Atlanta versus Dallas. Could also be an easy win for Dallas. Atlanta, still inconsistent as well, even though they've had a really easy time this tournament. A lot of people have slept on Atlanta, and that's mostly just because because of their inconsistency last season, as well as their pretty poor performance in the Melee. But this is a new side of Atlanta that we haven't seen yet. It's a Cinderella story for them, if you think about it, because here they are. They're one of the weakest links going into this, and they have a massive opportunity to win. And when their backs are against the wall, they've proven that they can do it. Just look at their match with Shock. That was their opportunity to win. That was their only opportunity left to win. And they did. So could we see it again? I could think so. But Dallas is just way too strong right now. They're incredibly dominant. They've proven that they are really hard to beat even without the hit scan. But we could even see Kai force Pine out to play just so they can shut him down. Which is why it's going to be such an exciting match because, again, these two teams haven't faced either. These are all new matchups outside of Atlanta versus Shanghai. So either way, we could possibly see Atlanta knocking Dallas out. But I don't really see that happening. I do think that Dallas is going to win, but I am going to give it a very close one to Atlanta. Because Atlanta is a strong team. They're not a bad team whatsoever. Which brings us to Shanghai versus Atlanta, another match we haven't seen. Both are really strong and have been able to pull off really impressive victories. And a lot of their strengths come from their damage. Atlanta with Kai and Shanghai with Fleta, but that's not to really put down Lip, who again is incredibly strong with style. I feel like a hit scan war will commence between Kai and Lip. Be incredibly interesting to see how well these two teams are able to play against one another in that type of hit scan environment. But I feel like this really would just come down to which team would benefit most from this restricted meta, and I feel like Atlanta has been the one to be able to do it better. Sure, you have strong players like Li Gong, Fleta, Lip, Void, but I am going to give it to Atlanta solely because of Shanghai's inability to really take down these high-tier North American teams. Because while Shanghai is a really strong team, where they fall is where they're against the high tiers. In Atlanta, I feel, is a really strong team, especially in this meta right now. So we could easily be seeing Atlanta win this. I actually am going to give it a 3-1. I don't feel like it's going to be as close of a match, but I could be easily wrong. But that would lead us to the grand finals, Dallas versus Atlanta. And this is where I feel like Kai is really going to be able to force out Pine, because Atlanta would have the momentum going into this. They have the power from beating Shanghai that they have this momentum going, and it could easily win them this tournament. Because again, like I said, when their backs are against the wall, they have been able to prove themselves. But Dallas is just so strong that it's going to be a hard one to call. Because I also feel that Dallas has the potential to win every tournament going into this year, including grand finals. They're just way too strong right now for most teams to be able to beat. So it all really just comes down to, again, like the Shanghai match, which team could benefit most from this restricted meta. And while it may be Dallas, I am going to give it to Atlanta. Because of what I have said previously, Atlanta has been able to prove that they can bring these shocking victories against high-tier teams, such as Dallas in the Shock. And while they did lose to Dallas earlier in the tournament, that's going to give them the momentum. That's going to start their reign of momentum to get to the grand finals and to actually beat Dallas. But either way, I feel like it's going to be a really good tournament and a really exciting tournament. And I'm really hoping that I can actually predict something right for once. Because I only got Dallas Fury going into this tournament. And now here we are going into June Joust. And I'm predicting Atlanta to win. Hopefully I can actually predict it right. Atlanta has failed us many a time. But I don't think they're going to fail us this time.